one of those things that happened, and like this blew my mind. I was like, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard of. One of the guys was like, we need AC in our shop. And I was like, are you kidding me? And that was an important thing to most of my guys. So we got AC in our shop.
Welcome back, everybody, to the ConExpo Con podcast. I am your host, Taylor White. This podcast is brought to you by our good friends over at Komatsu. Thank you, Komatsu, for being the sponsor of this show. With me here today, I have somebody that we actually just discussed, and we both share this love for black trucks, which is fantastic. So we already have something in common. I have Lynn Miller from Miller Earthworks. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Taylor, nice to be here. Great to hang out with you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, 100%, man. I'm very excited about this one. Like I said, I was doing a little bit of research on you beforehand, and you guys definitely, I love that, because your wife is a big part of the business as well too, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys are like a family-run business, and much like us as well too. And I want to talk about your growth, and because you guys were originally started in the 90s, but rather than me maybe kind of share a little bit about your story, because I find it very interesting. Maybe you could just kind of explain to people, if you were to summarize, what is it you do?
Yeah, basically started out trenching back in 1997. Now we're pretty much a full-fledged excavating company. Our niche market, I would say, would be doing the small jobs with the larger equipment that the big guys don't want to do. So we do have the larger equipment, and a lot of our jobs are smaller jobs. They're 1, 2, and 3 and 5 day jobs. We're a lot of guys that have the size equipment that we do, maybe aren't content with that.
I can relate to that as well too. I mean, that's us. And honestly, sometimes, I know that there's different struggles with different scales. And what's interesting about the podcast is I get to talk to people that are doing projects that they're on for multiple years. And then I have people that are on projects like yourself for a day, 2 days, and every week you're rotating through jobs. And that's kind of like our business as well too. And I know that, the back end of that is actually, I find, far more than these longer commercial projects, because it's a constant battle of, okay, you're pricing enough work to stay ahead of the guys and to stay ahead of the business, but you're rotating through the job so quick, and there's a bunch of different moving parts, and you got to float your machinery. What do you find about, the size that you're at right now? If you were to compare it to, a larger kind of, commercial business, what makes what you do like dynamic or interesting?
We have the privilege of designing or solving people's problems rather than maybe going off of somebody else's idea of what would make a project correct or do exactly what the customer wants. We get the opportunity to help the customer, walk alongside them and find out what they want and bring a solution. That brings me a lot of life in what I do. I do mostly sales and a few other things that business owners do, I guess, but I'm solely in charge of sales. And so I love to bring people solutions.
Nice. And yeah, you're very humble with saying, a few other things that business owners do, because I know, and that that's a lot of things, and it's not just during the day kind of deal. But what inspired you, I guess, what I'm interested on kind of your story is kind of like the slow growth approach to building your business to where it is today. Because you're not a small business in my eyes, but you're also not a large, hundreds and hundreds of employees. So like, what was kind of your approach for getting your business to where it is today?
So first of all, we've had some very humble beginnings. We started out with pretty much nothing. I grew up on the farm helping dad. We're in the Midwest. So nothing happens in a big way. For example, our population in our county right now is right around 61,000. I just turned 50 this year.
Congrats.
And thanks. When I was 16, our population in our county was 65,000. So our population is decreasing. So slow growth was not necessarily an option. It's just the way it works. So small communities, very loyal people. There's not a lot of people jumping on board with a young contractor and saying, "Oh, hey, let's use him." You've got to earn people's trust. So we have a lot to be thankful for. I mean, most of all, Jesus Christ's saving grace, but we have a lot to be thankful for in people growing with us over the years. I get the opportunity to work with some of the grandsons of my original customers way back in the day when I started trenching. So that's really fun.
Yeah, I love that. We kind of share the same thing. Like a big part of our business is septic systems. And what's really neat is there's a lot of replacement septics that we'll go to because I'm in a rural area as well too.
Right.
And they'll be like, your grandfather installed the original septic 45 years ago.
I love it.
Or your dad did this, 30 years ago. And that's a really cool kind of turnaround thing. It's interesting because I'm from a smaller town as well too. We don't have as many people as you, but I'm near like our main hub, Ottawa, which is a big city. But what do you think is kind of interesting being like where you are, and what would you advise to somebody that was starting their own business in a smaller town? Like, what was your mindset into it? Like, okay, like here we go. Don't try to overextend or overreach, and try to keep money in the bank. Don't try to finance everything. Don't try to leverage yourself with too much debt. Grow with the economy sort of deal.
First of all, back to those humble beginnings. I'm going to just tell you a quick story. I don't want to get lost in the weeds. So that first trencher, that first piece of equipment that I bought, I was working part-time on the farm for Dad, and he was encouraging me, like, anytime you got digging to do, you go do it, because like farming isn't great. All right. I borrowed money from a neighbor to buy that first piece of equipment. And I'll never forget, I couldn't make my payment one time. And so my wife and I sat in his living room, and I was like, man, I'm sorry. And he was like, you know what? He said, you pay me whenever you can. That's where we started out with. Yes, debt is a real part of our business model. Is I would love to say that, hey, we're cash basis, but that's just not the way it works. And back to that slow growth thing, it's a huge investment. And so yes, overextending is a big part of it. That 25% debt versus, total worth is like, that's a pretty important part. Once you start getting up into that, for me, once I start getting up into that 50% range, like, that's too risky for me. So yeah, slow growth is part of that.
Nice. What were some key milestones in your business that you kind of noticed are like turning points that were like, okay, this is now allowing us to go to that next step?
So, good question. So back in '07, that's 10 years after I started. At that point, I had 3 pieces of equipment. I was full-time, overwhelmed. My first long-term employee started with me, and he's still with me today. He's my project manager. He's dispatching guys. He's scheduling people, that kind of thing. That was a milestone for me. '08 and '09 were kind of banner years for us. We started doing some bigger jobs that proved to our neighbors, and actually probably proved to ourselves, that we were legit. Then I would say the next big milestone was 2015 and 16, probably. We did a 200 car rail siding that was about 5 miles from the shop here, and that was pretty significant in our company, just getting us to the next level. And then in 2019, we actually rebranded. I split the hauling and the excavating, and still very much run it, from the same office, same sister company, basically. So we rebranded, went to Miller Earthworks. So that was challenging. It was a lot of work, but I'm really glad we did. I mean, kept same bank accounts, everything. We just changed. We just rebranded. And then at that same time, I hired a business advisor, probably one of the best things I ever did. And he's advisor. Maybe I'm showing my pet peeves a little bit. He's not a coach. All right. He's a mentor. He's a business advisor. He helps me through some, maybe it's an HR issue. Maybe it's, trying to figure out when the right time is to upgrade a piece of equipment. And like, he's a solid dude. He's been with me for a long time, has no skin in the game, but he's a mentor. He's an advisor. That was monumental.
More and more guys, guys and girls that we talk to on the podcast, they say the exact same thing, though, that they have found a third party that, mentors them, business advice, that, they seek advice from, and they find a lot of solitude or a lot of, I don't know, just advice and good things come from that. And I love hearing that. And for me, it's kind of I'm third generation. So for me, that's kind of my father, so I was able to use him as, and still to this day, as, an advisor, or we go back and forth, or we kind of bounce stuff off each other. But that's really interesting that you say that. But what I am interested though, '08 and '09, historically, when you go back, those were some bad years for the economy. So pretty interesting for you to say that in '08 and '09, those are some pretty banner years. Why do you think that?
Again, we're in the Midwest, so we don't have the highs and lows in our economy that affect the coasts or the larger populations. So we're really ag based in our economy here locally. So to be honest, our economy is always a little bit depressed. So we got some big jobs. Locally, we have a couple large pipeline companies that have gas storage fields. We have salt underground. So they wash out caverns and actually store petroleum products underground in those salt caverns. So it was during that time that some of those companies were doing some big stuff, and yeah, that helped us through times when others of you probably were frustrated and struggling with a bad economy.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that was super tough. I mean, but that's interesting. And also for us too, we're kind of in a protected economy here too, because like I'm close to Ottawa, which is the nation's capital. So it's a lot of government money, a lot of federal employees and stuff like that. But one thing that we dealt with over, and you mentioned 2019, but when COVID came out, the construction industry here absolutely just boomed. I mean, was it kind of the same where you are, or is it like you said, it kind of just stayed kind of where it normally is?
I would say we saw something similar to what you did, Taylor. The last few years were super busy. I would say it's maybe tapering off a little bit more to like the 2019 level. We're busy. We're working every day. We're putting the same hours that we were putting in. So we're still busy, but we don't have that backlog that we did, 2 years ago.
Through whenever you're super busy, are you seasonal at all where you are? Like, do you get winter and stuff like that?
That's pretty random. I mean, there's winters that we'll get at least 18 or 20 inches of snow and like throughout the winter. There's other winters we don't even get 6 inches. So we'll never freeze up for a month at a time. We might freeze up, like our ground might freeze for 2 weeks, and then we'll hit a thaw and we'll have some 40, 50-degree days and, a week or two of that. And then it might get cold again. We're in a really dry climate, unfortunately. And so we don't get a lot of moisture. Often our moisture in the winter comes more as ice than snow.
So is your business then, are you able to keep going like year round? Like for us, we're seasonal. Like I got to make a year's worth of revenue, in essentially 5 months, maybe 6 months. So are you guys like year round, like month to month, you're good to go?
Yes, for the most part. Winter is not as profitable. Up to Christmas, we're going pretty strong. By the time Christmas hits, we start getting into that really cold weather. January, February are typically not as strong from a sales perspective, but that varies on weather. Man, if we get sunny days, my phone's ringing. If it is wet and cold, my phone doesn't ring as much. And so I do guarantee my guys 40 hours a week. I see it as a cost of doing business. There's not a long enough winter to kick them to the curb.
Wow. So no winter layoffs and guaranteeing them 40 hours a week.
Yeah. And I've tried to do that all my years. For what we do, we're very diversified. It's not like one guy gets in the same piece of equipment and does the same thing every day. So expertise and experience, like that's not really sitting at the coffee shop waiting for a job in the spring. I usually figure about a 4-year learning curve. If you hire somebody green from the time that you hire them to where they can do about anything on any piece of equipment, I usually figure 4 years. So the last thing I want to do is say, hey, I don't have any work for you, and take the risk of them finding somebody that will give them a year-round job.
Yeah, the more versatile that people are, I mean, the easier it is to keep them busy. And even when we hire people, I say that as well too. I'm like, listen, the more versatile you can be. I mean, for us, we have extreme winters, like minus 40 Celsius. We plow snow. We get, like 300 centimeters of snow a year, which is feet and feet of snow. So, I tell them, like, the more like prone you are to, learn how to plow snow or run a loader, run a skid with a blade on it, the easier it is to keep you busy. But do you find that it's easier then to keep your employees motivated, or like culture, up and just that kind of energy in the business, because they know, like, hey, maybe you, like the person I work for now, Miller Earthworks, they're going to guarantee me 40 hours versus the next guy or girl who isn't.
Keeping morale up and keeping your employees is like everybody. I mean, that's kind of the $1 million question. I mean, for me, I often tell my guys, like, we're nothing without you guys. Like, I can't do this without you. This company won't go far without you guys. So they are willing to overlook my mistakes and my fumbles. And they're good dudes. They're the face of our company. As far as how to keep morale, there's several things I do. I don't feel like I'm at the top of the pay scale locally. I'm probably at the top end, but I'm definitely not the top employer. As far as pay, I treat my guys how I want to be treated, or how I would want to be treated if I was working for the other guy. And that, I don't know how many details you want, but like, I give them perks. I mean, like, you've got to take care of your guys. All of my guys carry credit cards. All right. Company credit cards. So often they're working by themselves, or maybe with, one other guy. And we often work directly with the owner, as customer. And so I buy their lunch and I pay them straight through lunch. I would rather they take the customer to lunch and say, hey, and, get to know the customer. Relationships are key. I mean, we all know that. So I can't be everywhere. So I can't take every customer to lunch. I can't do that. So if your guys can interact in a healthy way, build those relationships with your customers, maybe that's through lunch, maybe it's something else. That's one of the ways. I love to involve my guys in decisions, small, large. I like to discuss it here at the office. So we meet at the office every morning before we go to work. They hop in company trucks and go their different ways. In the evenings, they all come back here. We got a pretty healthy environment. I usually have to push them out the office. I mean, they clock out, but they hang around and talk, and I'm like, all right, guys, I gotta go in. I got a family inside, so like, get out of here. So anyway, that's super healthy. I like to involve them in decisions. A couple of years ago, the last quarter of the year, I had some extra money to spend, and I brought them in on a rainy day, and I said, all right, guys, I said, I've got some money to spend, and I gave them all a piece of paper and pen. And I said, everybody write down the top 10 things that you think our company needs. And I said, there's no limits. Like, you figure, like, and so there were obviously a variety of things. And so the trucking guys, they focused more on some of the things they thought we needed on the trucking side. The guys that spend more time in the shop, all of my guys spend a little bit of time in the shop. Some spend more than others. All of my guys can run equipment too. So the shop guys tend to focus a little bit more on tools and that kind of thing. Anyway, so and then I gave everybody the opportunity to explain what their 10 things were and why they felt they were important. And then I gave them a new piece of paper, or I typed them up. A couple days later, I gave them these paper, and I said, now, new papers with a list. And I said, now, number these in order of importance from 1 to 10. One of those things that happened, and like, this blew my mind. I was like, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard of. One of the guys was like, we need AC in our shop. And I was like, are you kidding me? And that was an important thing to most of my guys. So we got AC in our shop,
Nice.
So, and it ranged from a new work truck to AC in the shop, stuff like that. Just involving your guys in decisions, letting them know that, hey, you might not go with what they recommend, but you would like their input. Like, that brings a lot of ownership for them.
Yeah, it means a lot to the employees. Like, I mean, that, like, 'cause again, like a big point where you said is treat employees how you would want to be treated, and like treat people how you would want to be treated, right? You learn that, in elementary school. And that is something that is so undervalued in saying, because when you actually think about it, or on a day-to-day basis as a business owner, if you actually thought about it, you're like, hey, if I was that guy sitting in the excavator, how would I want to be treated? What are the things that I would want to hear from my employer? And I love that you did that, because it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, I want a new work truck or this or that, but they're like, okay, well, he's listening. He's listening to us. And that is awesome, because that speaks volume.
We have a lot of fun together. We can have some pretty serious chats, and we laugh a lot. I love to treat them well. I can't always treat them as well as I'd like. And obviously there's limitations with what you can and can't do, just from a financial standpoint and also tax basis. One of the things I can do is I've tried to kind of brand in a way that has us pretty clean as far as just the way our equipment appears, how we keep our job sites, and then also how we appear personally. That's important to me. So I buy all their clothes. Obviously, we have shirts that have company logos or coats, all of that stuff. And then their jeans and boots. I'm like, I don't want anybody wearing ratty jeans. And the way I can control that is if I buy their jeans for them. So they can go buy the jeans that they want, the style they want. They've got a company credit card, and they can buy the type of steel-toed shoes that they want. So they're just things like that you can do to help them understand their value.
I love that. And, it raises a good question, because I would say probably 4 or 5 years ago, we were, more like that as well too. But with growth, and this is what interests me a lot, is there's too many employees and there's too many things going on that, okay, like last time we bought all the high vis for all the guys, I mean, it was $17,000-$18,000. And that was just shirts and sweaters.
Yeah.
And then, you get everybody's input, and, we used to all come to the shop in the morning, and, they'd clock in at the shop, come back, clock out at the shop. But once you get, 20, 25 guys, and it's like, okay, so now there's 25 guys that I'm paying a half hour, 45 minutes in the morning to just drive from the shop to the job site. And at the end of the day, from the job site to the shop, you start adding that up. We did the math one year, and it was like, man, there's like $100,000 to $105,000 in wages that we spent on travel that we don't account for when we estimate a job, because we estimate, okay, we're going to be on this job site for 40, 55 hours, work 20 hours, whatever the job takes. In your profit is covering your overhead, but necessarily all these extra hours that we were adding up. So it's interesting, because when you have fewer employees, I found that it was easier and controllable to do those sort of things and be like, okay, we're all getting new jackets. Well, now, wanted to give everybody new jackets is $350. And eventually, you have to, do that, but, not every year, or getting all their input all the time. So do you plan on staying, I guess, kind of like how you are, or do you kind of see maybe like, okay, we want to, get more guys. And then do you kind of see maybe, okay, some of the stuff that we do now maybe wouldn't work if I had 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 guys?
You make an excellent point, Taylor. And thanks for bringing that up. Like, I understand that position and I respect it because of the business model and the size that we are. I can do things that larger companies can't. And obviously, bottom line, we have to make money or not, we're not going to be in business. So I get that. And there would come a time. I mean, obviously there's a threshold there where you can't do as much of that stuff. And so I totally understand that. So my business model, because of my business model of staying close to home and all that kind of stuff, it does limit my growth. I'm not saying I'll never have 20 people. Right now, that's not really an option with where our local economy is.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very good point. I don't want to isolate or make people who can't or don't have the ability to do something like that feel like they're not doing enough.
Yeah. No, for sure. And like, ultimately, we can make the decision. And don't get me wrong, the guys need all new gear, and we'll be buying them all new gear and stuff like that. But for me, it turns into, okay, well, whenever you do stuff like that, or, okay, we're going to switch back to everybody coming and clocking in, all you're doing really essentially, it's not going to bankrupt the company, but you're just taking from your net profit. That's pure profit that you're grabbing from, which in my eyes, when we had the talk with the guys, because it was just this year that we started saying, okay, guys got to drive to site, and you're clocking in at site, and you clock out when you leave site. You got some guys that have been here 9-10 years, and they're like, what? Like, why are you changing it all of a sudden? And it's like, well, because the numbers don't lie. And if we keep running like this and everybody keeps like, there's going to be nothing left over. And they're like, well, what are you going to do with that money? It's like, guys, we need GPS. That's $67,000. Okay. we can upgrade, our loader. We need a new loader. Okay, there's different stuff in the shop that we can upgrade, tools, equipment, gear, all that stuff that like money we're saving. It's not for us to, to be like, oh, more profit for the business owners. I'm going to buy a Rolex or something. This is for you guys so that we can have nicer stuff, newer things, and allow us to keep growing, pay you guys more money, and do all those sorts of things. So I love it because I think that that's how it has to be, and especially when you're a smaller company, like I love that, and I try to, I guess, be nice to build a bigger company because we're around kind of the same size as you as well too. I mean, we have like 15, 16 guys this year. Last year was 23, 24. I try to, my main goal, I think, when people ask about growing the business is I want to remain like my grandfather started the business in 68. And my grandfather was the type of guy where at the end of the day, he'd have a beer with his guys, shoot the shit, hang out, talk. And I respect that. And I love that because we're a rural, we have a lot of farm kids and valley kids, like we're country people,
Right.
blue collar. And I love that. So trying to grow the business and stay true to who we are is really important, but at the same time taking that leap and growing and having to adopt to some of that corporate kind of stuff. It's just an interesting take, that's all. But I really like that you said keeping your job sites close, so you're not traveling super far for work. And what's the reasoning, I guess, behind that?
I feel like for myself, and once again, I've kind of tailored the company to what I like, what's important to me. And so my guys fall victim to that. And so we usually put in about 50 hours a week. For myself, I always felt like uh, there's more to life than just, I mean, there's life outside of work. So a lot of us have families. A lot of us want to go to church on Sunday. Like there are other things that we want to do. So working 7 days a week or working 14-hour days was something that I just wasn't super interested in. So because of that, if you're driving 2 hours away, like that really cuts into your day. If you're only putting 10 hours in, all of a sudden you're working 6 hours. Well, that doesn't work. So I like to keep my jobs close. So some of the challenges to that, first and foremost, is sales. So that's on me. So am I getting, what am I bidding my jobs at? And am I taking every call? Am I weeding through, like during COVID and the years after that? Am I weeding through the stuff that we don't need to mess with? So that sales thing can be a challenge. One of the things that we talked about earlier was relationships. So I had a guy walk in the office the other day, and so most of our work orders they're on busy, but they're also on paper so that we can see them at a glance, see the whole group of them. All right. And so I had a customer walk in the other day and we got a counter full of work orders, and he started looking at those work orders. He's like, man, he said, I know most of these people. I said, yeah. I said, that's a fun part, but it's a scary part too. And so you're working with people that like outside of work, and you're working with people that have been in the community forever. And if they go to the coffee shop and they talk, you want them to be saying good things. So treating people right with integrity and honesty is huge in being able to work close to home.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's key, and it's the same around here, right? Like this person, but even if you didn't know them, I mean, like word of mouth honestly gets us a lot of our direct business to owner relationship, for septic or something. You're like, oh, they're in the same neighborhood, like, oh, who did your septic? Were you happy with them? Yeah, Kenway Construction did it, and it kind of carries on through there, which is pretty interesting. But what I like about what you said is, there's life outside of work, which I struggle more with that. I mean, I'm 29. I have, two young kids, 3 and 1. And, I really struggle with getting home, and especially in the summertime. Like I said, our season is so short. So when it's go time, it's go time. But it sounds like, you really prioritize like that work-life balance, or making sure that you are present or something at home. So is there any kind of tips that you would say to a guy like me, that maybe is struggling to get home, and his wife's kind of like, hey, like 7:30 again, like, what are you doing?
So it's easier for me. We're like, at stages of life make a difference, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So our youngest daughter graduated from high school this spring. So I don't have the young kids at home. Uh, as an excavator, I think most of us just love our job. Maybe not, but I do. I love my job. I could work a lot of hours. But at the end of the day, or no pun intended, but we do what we want to do. If we don't want to be at home, we're not going to be at home. So that's one of the things that like we prioritize what we love the most. So I mean, I guess I just encourage you, man. I mean, it can be said that you can sacrifice temporary for the long term, but I feel like work is the temporary part. The long term is your family. And so what I've always tried to do is to sacrifice the things that will always be there for the things that may not always be there. So my kids aren't always going to be here. So anyway, that's one of the things that helps me try to keep it right. I don't always get it right. So interestingly enough, now that you asked that, I'll tell you, I had 4 of my top staff do an evaluation on me here a couple months ago.
Wow.
And I've been wanting to do it for a while and I couldn't really get my hands on it. Anyway, I found one that I really, really liked. We tailored it a little bit to what we wanted. It was really good for me to hear. I got some really, really low marks from some of my staff on how I separate personal life and business. And I was surprised because, man, I thought I was doing all right. And the funny part about it is, so our oldest daughter is my office manager. So she gave me high marks on that. And she's honest enough to, like, she would have been honest. If she thought it was bad, she'd have told me. And so it's kind of funny. But I think part of that is stages of life, how your kids perceive it at 25 is different than somebody might see it when their own kids are 10, And so I think some of that, but it's something I try to get right and I don't always. One of the things that helped me a lot early on is I got my office out of the house. That changed a lot for me as far as separation. Another thing that I do better with now that I didn't do as good with early on is we train our customers. So if our customers are calling in the evenings or texting in the evenings, if I blow their call or I blow their text and I get back with them at 7:00 the next morning, they'll figure it out. All of a sudden they're like, oh, he won't answer if I call, or, oh, he won't text me back. I'll just wait till 5 a.m. and he'll text me. I think that's part of it too. As your wife and kids get older, like, ask them, most of the time for me anyway, if I'm going to ask them, usually I know the answer before I even ask it. But I think most of us have enough of a moral compass to know kind of what's a good separation. And it's different for everybody. Culture has something to do with it. You mentioned, having to get all your working done in 6-8 months. Well, that's a big difference for somebody that can work year round. Well, there's not quite the pressure. So everybody has a little bit of a different line.
Yeah, it's interesting for us, like around this area, like when I grew up, like my dad was not around at home a lot. And like that, I just, and then my mom, she was a hairdresser by trade. So she would cut hair, really late at night. So we always kind of had a babysitter, looking after us. But in the wintertime is whenever my dad would be home more because the winters were slow. So then that's when, we would go snowmobiling or do some ice fishing or stuff like that. And that's kind of honestly, like, it's funny. Like, I remember being super young and because, dad not being home a lot, it always caused a lot of, stuff. Like my mom would be like, Dave, you need to be home more for the kids. And I just remember growing up hearing that. And I remember like telling myself, like, I'm never going to be like that. And I remember saying to my father, I'm not going to be like that. Like, I'm going to make sure I'm home when we were first having our daughter, Kara, 3 years ago. And, I'm not going to be like that. And then, here I am kind of self-reflecting. And like you said, like I am aware and I do understand that, I should be, prioritizing that more. But I look at the business, we've grown over the past 3 or 4 years. And if I didn't put in what I put in and the team didn't put in what they put in, I truly don't think we would be set up like we are now. where we have a lot of great assets. We bought another property with a bigger office, and our business is great. And in return, my family gets to, the fruit of your labor. My family gets to enjoy that. Maybe this March we're going to go to Disney, enjoy and spend time together. So I see it kind of like a trade-off like that, but it is difficult. And it sounds like you kind of really have understanding, like the demands of your business and relating that back, to your personal life. But I like the points that you were raising about, like somebody starting out in business, it's, you got to kind of figure out what's more important and what's not. And I guess, yeah, like what did you find it a little more difficult when the kids were younger?
Yeah. So one of the things that comes with business is sacrifice. And I get that, like, especially when I was working by myself, those first few years, we had toddlers at home. I would come home and I'd be working on my on my junky equipment to try to make sure it was going to work the next day. And fortunately, I was working out, working here at the house. And so, because my shop is right beside the house. So that was nice. But yes, to your point, when you're starting out, like, there are sacrifices to be made, and you can't draw clear lines uh, and say, I'm locking the office door at 5 o'clock at night and I'm not going to think about work again until the next day. I mean, that's just not, like, it's not possible. Although to be fun, it's not an option. And so I understand that. I mean, we're almost at the 30-year mark. So I have the opportunity to be able to do some of those things that I would have never been able to do at year 3 or 5.
That's awesome. A lot of our podcast listeners, they listen to, for advice on business, obviously, and they get lots of dynamics. They have guys like me that are, it's generational business, and maybe the generations are growing it, maybe they're not. But also, what's really I like hearing about as well too is, from your perspective and your point of view. So, somebody that's listening that is starting from zero, starting from nothing, what advice would you give to somebody just starting out in the industry?
I have a very supportive wife. So early on, my wife was a very vital part of the business. She did all the bookkeeping. She did like like everything. She came from a family that was pretty low risk. And so we were working through everything together. So if one of us didn't feel comfortable with the purchase or, whatever, it didn't happen. So as the business grew, she was more and more involved. That made her busier at home. Uh, and that was tough, but finding a good wife, like a supportive spouse, is a huge thing. If they're your biggest fan, your biggest cheerleader, that just goes a long ways. I know not everybody has the opportunity for that. And I'm not, you can be a good businessman without that, or business person without that. Don't understand me that way. But that's a huge thing. Having a mentor is a big thing. Uh, a banker and an insurance company and an accountant that share similar values.
Yeah.
There's good people out there, but they don't all share similar values. And so when you find somebody that sees life kind of like you do, that goes a long way. The other thing that I don't know, I know I didn't do well with this, especially early on. I try to do better with it now, is like, just get good input. Ask people, like, be more curious. Curiosity is a big thing. Ask people questions about themselves, what they think about your company. Just be curious about life. Learn to ask advice, learn to listen to people. Most people have something that you can take away from. It may be on a variety of levels, but most people have something to give just when you're talking to them. If you have employees, this is something that I didn't do well with at all in the earlier years. I'm trying to do better with it now. Have difficult conversations with your employees. I mean, it takes it from possibly losing an employee to working through something that causes tension and coming out with a healthy result like that. Man, that's huge. So having those difficult conversations is a big thing. If starting out, if you cultivate that culture early on, it just gets easier and easier. And so if you're trying to cultivate it at 45 or 50, it's harder. So if you can do it when you're younger, that, like, it's just easier to fall into that habit. building strong relationships with your customers and your employees. Like relationship is so big in business.
Yeah, I think, relationships, just understanding people. I would say, to your point, it's, if you could summarize a lot of your points, it's understanding people, right? And that falls into building relationships with new clients. It falls into understanding your spouse, your kids. It falls into, understanding, what your employees want, your employees, people that are working for you. And I love that about the point about, confrontation and dealing with that sort of stuff head on. Because there's a lot of times when I'm, up in the office or in the morning, the guys are standing around and, you're tossing around in your head. Just like, okay, like kind of bothering me that this guy's, well, he's been late for the past, 2 weeks. Like I go out there and have the conversation with them, but then it's first thing in the morning. And now I'm, giving them kind of, some crap first thing in the morning. But having those tougher conversations, the smaller, tougher conversations. Obviously, there's worse ones than that. But I'm just saying, like, if you let that stuff fester, the small conversation of telling him to show up and make sure you're on time, it will turn. If you don't have that conversation, it'll turn into something bigger down the road. Which is what I've kind of found is just deal with it as it is and grow from there. But I am interested. I want to ask you about like your day to day. How has your day to day kind of changed from when you were running equipment all the time and doing it all? Are you still on site in equipment? Are you in the office? You're estimating operations, that sort of stuff?
I'm mostly sales and operations. I do some estimating. I have a guy in the office here 90% of the time, and he does more estimating as far as like off of a print. We do some work off of a previously designed project. So he does all of that. I don't do any of that. I'm on the job site quite a bit, just like in the mornings, getting guys started. If it's a new job, I was the only one that interacted with customers, so I know kind of I know what he wants. So I'll go out and get guys started. But actually spending time on a piece of equipment, I don't. I love to run equipment. I would still be on equipment if I didn't have anything else to do. Oh, about a month ago on a Saturday, I was like, you know what? There's an excavator out on the job, and all we're doing is hogging dirt on a pond. I just can't keep my hands off this thing. Saturday morning, I went out. Saturday mornings are slow for us at our house because I'm a girl dad, and so like there's just really nothing happening early mornings and on Saturdays. So I went out on the job and I threw dirt for half a day, and it was a lot of fun. So if I don't have any other pressures, I would love to be on a piece of equipment, but it's not the way it works. And I love to interact with people. I love find solutions to people's problems. So running equipment's probably my first love, but sales, I really enjoy that too.
So what about succession then? I mean, you said, your oldest, she's in the office with you. Do you think about succession? Do you and your kids talk about that? What the future of the business is? Do they have any interest in maybe taking it over or?
So that's actually been a discussion for my business advisor and I this year. 50 years old, it's a little ways from retirement, or at least it is in my world. so so we're talking about it. Basically, what we're putting in place right now is talking about positions without names attached. Like there's clear management. As far as actual business owner, that's not quite as clear at this point, but in my mind, that there's a little bit of time to work that out yet.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I don't feel a lot of urgency, but I don't want to be the man at 65. I want somebody else to be the man or woman, as far as that goes. I want somebody else to be the day-to-day guy, person that answers. All right. So yes, we are talking about succession, but it's not super detailed and super urgent at this point.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, I always like asking, especially, some of you started the business and then you have kids. And I think that's something great to, to think about. And like you said, you have a lot of time to even plan for that, but
I do.
Yeah, you do. And I love talking to people about that. I mean, hey, my dad's 60 and he'd say the same thing. He's still got lots of time.
Right. Well, at 60, I want to have it figured out. I want to,
it's figured out. Yeah.
I want to have names,
Yeah.
but one of the things I want to add this, and one of the things that I do have the privilege of, and being a girl dad, we've got 3 daughters, and I've got the privilege of working with all 3 daughters. Our youngest daughter is she details trucks and equipment. And like I said earlier, one of our branding things is keeping everything clean. So she's keeping the cabs clean. She's keeping the windows clean. She's washing. She works hard every day. Our middle daughter, actually, she replaced our middle daughter. Our middle daughter got married and is now living out of state, but where her husband's from. But she did that before. Our oldest daughter is still office manager. She does a great job with that. And so the opportunity to work with my kids as a girl dad, I never expected it.
That's awesome.
And so to be able to work with my kids every day, like, that is super cool.
I love that. I think, my father would say the same thing, and I hope for that one day.
Right. Yeah.
I think that would be awesome. But listen, it's crazy how fast the time flies when you're talking to you. And I know that you're a super busy guy. And I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today, Lynn, and sharing your story and what you're doing down there.
Well, thanks for having me, Taylor. I want to say again, like, we got so much to be thankful for. My family, my employees, like, as a one-man show, I could never do what we're doing today. There were so many days in the earlier years that we were praying for that phone to ring. And today that doesn't happen as much, as far as, being desperate for work. So we just really, we have a lot to be thankful for, in spite of the boss,
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. And it sounds like, your employees, the way you talk, it definitely sounds like you are very thankful and you understand. You're very self-aware with that. And I look forward to seeing you guys in your next steps and all that stuff. So thank you very much for coming on today.
Thank you, Taylor. Thanks for having me.
This has been the ConExpo Con podcast brought to you by our good friends over at Komatsu. Thank you very much. Have a good one.